Greg Abbott, what kind of person puts people on a bus and sends them to a city that is in the midst of a hurricane and that has had an earthquake on the same day that they are on hurricane watch, flood watch, tropical storm, stay off the roads, don't go outside your house, find some comfort and cover? What kind of person puts innocent people and sends them into literally the eye of the storm?
The same person that watched elementary school age children get murdered and looked at their families and said, oh, I guess we'll just give more guns to people, give guns to teachers. The same person that put razor wire on floating barriers on the Rio Grande, where people are being lacerated and dying. So, that kind of person. I mean, Greg Abbott has shown that cruelty is the point of his administration, and he will use whatever means he can, deception, putting people on buses in the middle of a storm, flying people across the country to places where they have no hope of seeking assistance, because he has no respect for the human dignity of these immigrant people. So, Greg Abbott has shown himself to be, quite frankly, uncaring, and that's the most flattering thing I can say. I think Karen Bass called him evil, and I think to put people in harm's way because they're not your citizens, because they're not your constituents, is one of the lowest things you can do, particularly since the things that these people are fighting for are human rights that are understood as sacrosanct by every international organization around the world, and seeking refuge and seeking asylum is not illegal. And to treat people like this is just cruel. But again, cruelty is the point.
Yeah, Sharon, Abbott has made, as the professor said, has made a career now of trying to usurp the federal government's authority around immigration, border patrol. He is engaging in conduct that arguably violates the Constitution, violates federal law, because states have, that's not the immigration laws are not the province of states, but yet he continues to erect borders. He continues to defy the federal government. Do you think Biden is being tough enough with this guy? I mean, Karen Bass called him out. Governor Gavin Newsom called him out. The mayor of New York, all of these, big city Democratic mayors have called him out, but he won't stop. He is just like a dog with a bone, trying to make this point that if Biden doesn't, quote unquote, lock down the border in a way that he thinks is sufficient, these migrants that are coming across the border in Texas are folks that he has an obligation to ship to wherever, California, New York, Massachusetts. What do we do with someone like him? What should the Biden administration do?
Well, it does seem as though the president does not want to have a direct confrontation with Governor Abbott. What he should do, whether it does any good or not, is call him up and have one of those kinds of conversations, and no matter who's in the room listening there. It doesn't appear that's going to happen, but I have found with him the darkness, evil, as the mayor out of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, says, it's there, but I find myself wanting to ask, who hurt you? Who hurt you that you dig so deep on this? When he sued and was in that jogging accident with the tree that put him in a wheelchair, he sued for things like pain and suffering and mental anguish. All the harms that he felt should be remedied in the only way he could. And I can't help but think he's so wounded in his heart that he can only see the suffering for him, but not others. It's like, who hurt you? And what do you do with someone like that?
All right, Dr. Carter, we're talking about Governor Abbott and this really demonic, let's just call it what it is, policy that he has in terms of sending migrants to states like California and New York. But he's also set up these barbed wires and these other barriers in this community called Eagle Pass. And many of the residents in this community first agreed to let the State Department basically take over their land so that they can conduct this operation. But now some of these residents are having second thoughts. They're saying, first of all, it's been going on for 2 years. Their land has been completely taken over by the state officials. And there have been recent reports of injuries and at least 2 deaths near where some of these buoys and other barriers have been set up. And people are saying, we don't want to be a part to this. We don't want to watch women and children get injured and die as they're trying to, come into this community based on these barriers that have been set up by Governor Abbott. Some of his own Texas Department of Public Safety officials are also complaining, as well as the Border Patrol. I think what's so interesting to me about this story is how everyday people are manipulated. These people thought they were doing something good to help protect the border. And now they see that this really isn't about protecting the border. This is about Governor Abbott scoring points and being willing to allow people to be injured and to even die to make his point, i.e. to, score some points about him being tough on controlling the border versus Biden, who he says, refuses to lock down the border. I really feel bad for these people.
I do on one hand, because look, Governor Abbott may have asked and they gave permission, but it was very clear that this was going to happen one way or the other. I think they were going to use some form of eminent domain to achieve the same end. So even if the residents had said, no, I don't want you here, the ask was sort of a courtesy, not necessarily something that the governor's office would have abided by. I also think you have a situation where people are fatigued because this seems like, in theory, something that's going to take hold and this issue will be, solved in 2 months. It's been a couple years now, and people realize, I think, the depths of this issue. And you don't stop people with these kinds of deterrents. People don't move when there is something more viable on the other side. And that is not the case here. So these deterrents aren't going to do anything but make an already perilous trip more dangerous. And as you said, these state troopers, that is not their job. They are not immigration enforcement officials, yet they are trampling on people's land. They have taken over these people's spaces. Many of these people are farmers or do something in agriculture. So there's access to their land that is no longer there because it is taken up now by state officials. So I think there are a plethora of things that are happening. On the other hand, I do think because it is now causing residents discomfort, they are now rethinking these sort of moves. They said it's gone too far and all of that. But to me, it's a little bit of, well, now we heard a little bit too. So we don't quite know that we want to continue to participate because it was okay if the hurt was going one direction. But now that hurt is being shared in 2 places. And it's like, I'm a little less, certain about these efforts. So on the one hand, I feel sorry. On the other, I'm a bit like, I can't care, but so much.
Okay, Dr. Carter, you're saying, look, how dare these people now complain when they were all for it, when, as you said, they thought this was only going to hurt the immigrants trying to enter the country. And to my point about what Joe Biden is doing, the Justice Department is in court right now. They've taken Abbott to court. They are demanding that he cease and desist with respect to his state operation and his efforts to overtake the functions of the federal government. Democratic Congress people have also visited this region. They also are aware of Greg Abbott's efforts and apparently are trying to alleviate some of the harm that he's causing, not only to these residents and these property owners, but also to the poor people who are stuck and who are being injured by these barriers. So we're going to keep our eye on that to see what happens. This is why elections matter. This is why having control of the House matters and the Senate. And obviously the Department of Justice, because we can at least try to stop someone like Greg Abbott.